FDIC.
Questions on the bill. Gentleman from DeSoto, Mr. Criswell.
So from what I understand, there is federal law that covers this already. Am I correct in that?
You're absolutely correct.
So do you have the numbers, or do you know how many women have had to use the federal law in the last year or since it existed? I don't care what the time frame is.
I would venture to say, gentlemen from DeSoto, we have state law acts with the exception of Mississippi. So in other words, for the 49 other states, they have implemented some kind of measure to provide remedies.
Do we have any kind of estimates how many women that would affect?
No, I don't, but gentlemen, if it's one woman, that's one too many.
Well, what else do you need to say after that? It's Angela Cockerham of the House of Representatives, who is also chairwoman of Judiciary A. Good morning, Angela. How are you?
Good morning, Paul. How are you?
I'm doing fine. It's good to see you, and thank you for coming in. I appreciate it. That was one of those classics that you have to keep and put in the archives as far as floor debates from the House. And first of all, congratulations on that one. We are the only state that's left that doesn't have that law in place, or are we not?
We're the only state that hasn't implemented some type of Equal Pay Act. Hopefully that we can accomplish that this year, prayerfully.
Where is it now in the process?
So our bill 770, the House bill, will now go to the Senate, and the Senate has a bill as well. I'm sure that they'll be considering, and if the Senate does act on their bill, it'll come to the House.
Is it different in any ways? In other words, it's going to be hard to come together on this one, or is it very similar?
I think that there are a few differences in the Senate bill, and so hopefully, though, we'll be able to come together and get a really good bill.
Well, that's interesting that they would be different, and just hearing your tone of voice, does that mean that there are some things in there that maybe would be a deal killer for you that's in the Senate bill?
Not necessarily. So I'm not sure. I think that there are a couple of bills in the Senate. And the reason why I say that is that I'm not really sure which one and what final form it'll end up, since they haven't taken it up. As you know, there could be floor amendments. So don't take anything away from my tone. I just don't know what the final form will be that the Senate passes.
You've got several other good bills in there, and one of them is a bill that's the Sexual Assault Response to College Students Act. I think that's HB 589. You want to speak to that one? And is it still it's still moving through the process also? Right.
So that's in Judiciary B this year, and the House has taken up this bill for several years, and it will go to the Senate. I'm praying that we'll be able to get some traction on this bill as well, just so we could provide some uniformity. When I first introduced this bill, what I learned, Paul, was that each university or college had some type of measure in place as a response to sexual assault, but this bill would provide some uniformity for all of the universities and colleges.
I'm sitting here looking at some of the bills that you have. You've got quite a few bills that are dropped, and all of them are pretty darn good. Medical Practice Act, to speak to any of the ones that you really want to highlight while we have a chance to have you on.
Sure. So we have the Medical Practice Act. That's a really good one. That's one that is being promoted by the State Medical Licensure Board. I also have, I don't know if you see it on there, Paul, the sexual assault kits, and that's a really important one as well. As you know, we don't have a backlog here in the state of Mississippi. I think that Commissioner Tyndall and our crime lab are doing a very good job in making sure that these kits get analyzed. But in other states, they do. And this would just provide some uniformity with respect to the collection of those kits. Back in 2019, if you can recall, we addressed human trafficking, and you've even had some guests on to address human trafficking and talk about that, and I appreciate that. But we have two bills that are in JUDA A that will go back and kind of add some additional measures to our human trafficking laws. And there are quite a few good bills there in Judiciary A. When I was looking this morning, just kind of going through the list, and Judiciary A gets, I would say probably it's one of the top 5 committees in terms of the volume of legislation that we receive. And so this morning I was looking over the bills again because we're going to have another committee meeting probably before the end of the week. And in addition to the bills that I have introduced, there are other good bills that members of the House have introduced as well. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to take those up. There are bills in the committee that will address ceilings for attorneys. As you know, we have a lot of attorneys that work for state agencies, and these attorneys could go anywhere to work. We want to make sure that we have good attorneys that are still working in our state agencies. Another bill that I would like to highlight that I think that is really important is, I think probably a couple of weeks ago, Judge Troy Odom, who's a chancellor from Rankin County, he headed up our domestic law task force, Paul, and we started meeting in the summer of last year, just reviewing child support laws and our divorce laws. And we came out of that task force. We had several judges and practitioners that comprised the task force. And I'm very proud to say that we came out with a lot of good recommendations.
Yeah.
And I think you'll see some bills addressing those recommendations.
I was thinking about when you were talking, I was thinking about the way you embrace the law. Did you do that at a young age, too? I mean, is that something that you wanted to do? I mean, because I see the excitement in your face when you talk about it. We've talked before many, many times, but seems like if there is something in the future for you, you make a great judge. And we've got somebody coming in the green room in a few minutes you could talk to about that. But is that something that you think you'd like to do?
It's something that I definitely would consider. You know, I will tell you this. I absolutely love the law. You probably can see it on my face when I talk about it and hear the excitement. But ever since I was young, you know, in my formative years, elementary school, it's something that I wanted to do, and very blessed and fortunate to have the opportunity to do it. And when I get the bills, I get really excited just reviewing, you know, other colleagues' bills just to see what thoughts they have and the changes that they'd like to see in the law and how it benefits the state of Mississippi. So you're right. I absolutely love the law.
How different is it as chairwoman now, being the chairperson of that committee, than it is vice or not even on a committee?
Well, early in my legislative career, I actually was vice chair of Judiciary A when Representative Blackman was chairing it, and absolutely loved and was very appreciative to have that opportunity. And so I've had the opportunity to chair Energy, and I've had the opportunity and very blessed and fortunate to chair Judiciary B. Judiciary A is a little bit different because you and I have had this discussion before. Judiciary B is mostly criminal, Judiciary A primarily civil, and it's different in respect not only as it relates to the kinds of bills or the types of bills that are referred to Judiciary A, but also the nature of being able to look at our Supreme Court, our Court of Appeals, and our judges. And so it's different in that aspect as well.
I want to go back to trafficking because you and I had talked about this in previous conversations, but it was probably 4 or 5 years ago. It's been a couple of years now, but I'd say probably 3, 4, or 5 years ago, we actually had just then, that hasn't been that long ago, the first conversations about human trafficking, which people had no idea that was going on, and it just exploded after that. And thank God we had people like the Speaker of the House, Philip Gunn, jump on board. But I remember the first conversation we had with some of the sheriffs and the police officers about what was going on across the state of Mississippi, and it just blew our mind that this was happening in our state. And we've come a long way since then, and we thank people like you for standing up and getting this done. That human trafficking bill, basically one of them says, if I'm wrong, correct me, that even if you're participating in some way, you will be held accountable. We'll talk more with Angela Cockerham coming up next. Back with Angela Cockerham, who is the chair of Judd A in the House, and I was just thinking, Angela, ever get the chance to speak to some groups in schools or elsewhere, some young people?
I do. I get the chance, especially in my district, to speak to young people in elementary and high school, and I get the chance to speak on a collegiate level as well. So I'm always talking to students, yes.
Yeah. I think they need that so badly, to hear things from folks like you, if people who've made it at that level, and I'm glad you do that. You had one other bill here that I wanted to talk about before we moved on to the big three here, but HB 833, and I don't understand this one, the Mississippi Motor Vehicle Commission law, I think it's been referred to Ways and Means, prohibits direct sales by manufacturers except as provided. There's always a reason for that, but exactly what? Give me the analysis of that bill.
So with that bill, you're right. It has been referred to Ways and Means, and what that bill is seeking to accomplish is that you've got motor vehicle dealers throughout the state, and occasionally you will have new dealers that want to come in. It's my understanding that the Department of Insurance has some special regulations or rules with respect to that, and we're trying to make sure that it just conforms.
So in other words, somebody pops up, they've got to go through the all the paperwork to get it done.
Exactly. That's the short version.
Go ahead.
I do want to say this, though. I want to go back, if we can, and just revisit human trafficking, because we were going to talk about that when we came back from the break.
Yeah.
I do just want to add that Speaker Gunn has worked very hard on making sure that we get our human trafficking laws up to date. And there have been, as you've seen in the news and you've talked about, so many human trafficking cases in the state of Mississippi. And the Center for Crime Prevention, they have worked really hard, as well as all of our law enforcement agencies. And so I really want to thank all of our law enforcement agencies for the work that they're doing.
Two of the weak spots here, because when we talk about these things, we always talk, we don't want to sound like some politician in Washington by just telling us what the problem is, but not giving us solutions. And I think two of the solutions there, well, of course, is always funding. You have to have more money to address that and solve it. But the other thing was to train police officers, social workers, whomever it happened to be. And there's three parts to this, but that second part was train police officers what to expect, how to do it. Some police officers who've been there, who've seen it, who have the telltale signs at stops. And I think that training was so important. I'll ask your opinion on that one. And the other thing is what to do with these young ladies, or in some cases males, what to do with them after this, after they're rescued. So speak to that. Are you satisfied with where we are on that right now, or?
Well, since the implementation of the bill a couple of years ago, back in 2018, I believe 2019, there has been expansive training. I was a part of the task force after we passed the bill a few years ago, and was very proud just the way all of the law enforcement agencies, the social workers, how everyone just came together in a spirit of partnership and cooperation, because they realized that it was a big issue for our state. And so the training is occurring. We are putting money into this particular effort. We realize that if we're asking, in other words, we don't want it to be an unfunded mandate. So if we're asking law enforcement and everyone to come together to combat this problem, just as you said, we realize that there has to be money there for that effort.
I know when you think about the horrors of life, losing a child is terrible. But I'm telling you, and I don't think it's any worse, or that I don't know how to put this, but to lose a child that has been snatched off the street somewhere, you don't know where he or she is. It's got to be a nightmare that never ends for those parents and loved ones. And the other part of this is, and I think it was the most demoralizing part that we sat down and talked initially, that some of the sheriffs told us, and I was squeezing them off the air, and I think they also thought it was just horrific that a lot of these young kids were sold into prostitution by parents and grandparents. And boy, it's hard to think about, but it happens.
Unfortunately, it's sad, but it's true. It is one of the horrors of this. I've heard stories of this as well, where young ladies, young men are sold into this by family members. And I think that's where the reaching out or being able to have resources for individuals once they come out of that situation.
Absolutely.
Because it's traumatic for them. I've heard experiences and stories from young ladies and young men who were victims of this, and to hear their stories and how they were able to turn their lives around, and now they're advocates themselves. It's really a blessing.
Something just popped into the brain here because I thought I saw it, but I didn't read it, so I hope I'm not overstepping it. I thought I saw that Elizabeth Smart was coming to the state to talk. I don't know if you saw that.
I did.
But did you?
I did.
Okay.
I did.
So I didn't make that up then. I did see that.
No, she actually came.
Oh, she's already been here?
Well, I'm not sure if she's coming back. I know she came last year. She did. Mm-hmm.
That's an incredible story of courage that she has been able to take her life in a different direction. God bless her. All right, your thoughts as a member of the legislature and the House of the personal income tax, because the governor yesterday, and I know you watched or listened to a lot of that, but your thought, first of all, of what the governor said, and then your thoughts on the personal income tax.
So my thoughts on what the governor said in his speech, I think he addressed some really key points with respect to education. Education is so important for all the reasons that we all know, but especially during the time of COVID. And the way that our teachers have really made sure to stay in the classroom, to make sure that if there is a big outbreak, that students are still learning. The other piece of this, too, that I just want to insert as a caveat, Paul, is that throughout this pandemic, especially as it relates to education, we've seen the importance of the internet. And so I'm also proud of what we're doing in the House to make sure that our rural areas have access to the internet. Economic development is so important. That's another thing that the governor touched on. And so I'm very proud to say that as we move forward, I know that the House and Senate are addressing, how to use these ARPA funds. And so hopefully we can put this money, and there's quite a bit of consideration that's already going into that now, put this money so that it will have some lasting impact for years to come. With respect to the personal income tax, I do believe that we should have some way to give something back to citizens. They work hard, and I think that with the House plan, the way that we've also implemented a break on grocery taxes, I could spend, the next amount of time that we have here, you could too, talking about the amount of inflation. You go to the grocery store now, and it's really expensive just to buy groceries. And so I think that if we can help keep money in the pockets of our residents, and also at the same time help them with groceries, it's come to such a critical point right now in terms of our state and our nation with respect to making sure that the basics are addressed. And I think that's something that we're focusing on in the House. We don't want to make it harder because there are already so many problems attributed with life anyway, but if we can do just one thing to make it easier on the lives of Mississippians, I think we've done some good.
And as the governor alluded to, it's that juxtaposition of this time and where we have more money than we've ever had, and with a B, billions on that side. And on the other side, as you alluded to, we have families hurting now because of what's going on at the grocery store. The shelves are getting less and less as far as the selection, and the costs are just absolutely outrageous.